Here we go. Okay. So December's Ask Me Anything. Tracy's here to help us with navigating food. And, it's one of my favorite topics because I love to eat. Oh, here comes Terry. And, we've, like I was saying a minute ago, we've been connecting over LinkedIn and, various other associations and also in person a few times. And, I think now's a really fun time to talk about food and, not only how it works for our meetings and events, but also just around our own tables. And, my son has a nut allergy that he acquired in his early 20s. So I fed that kid peanut butter and everything else you can imagine up until he left my house. And one day he was eating Thai food and, his
Wow.
face puffed up and was having a hard time swallowing. And, that was the beginning of an odyssey of, I mean, we're very lucky because his is not life threatening, but if I ever do a cookie exchange, I make sure that I don't combing anything I'm going to feed him. I keep anything that I got from somebody else and I don't know what could possibly be in
Hmm.
it. It just stays on a separate plate. And I'm like, Nick, those are cookie exchange cookies. These are the ones that I made. And then he knows he can eat, he knows he can eat them. But, just in my professional experience at meetings, when I was long ago at Microsoft, we had a couple situations where something got mislabeled or an attendee, just wasn't paying attention and grabbed one of them wasn't paying attention and grabbed a brownie off of the nut tray instead of the non-nut tray. And, there we go. So I'm hoping that Tracy can share some of her expertise with us and, all of us share some stories around, what situations have you encountered? What have you done to work around it? And then really what I want to talk about also is food waste. And Tracy's got some information about the improved legislation for hoping to help reduce food waste. So let's take it away. Tracy, I'll hand it off to you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm just going to ramble. No. Well, it's when we're talking about dietary needs. Anybody watch that show? It's all her fault or all her fault. It's new
Mm-mm.
on. I watched it through. I think it's on. I don't know what it's on, but I watched it through Paramount. So I'm not going to tell you. It's this kid gets disappears and but there is a food allergy incident in it.
Hmm.
And I won't tell if you're, is anybody have intention of going to read the book or watch the TV show? Okay, so like in episode 3 or 4, he and his brother are sitting there and they're eating something, and his brother looks at him. He goes, "No, I made sure that there's no soy in the food." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, because I always feed you. I'm not going to feed you soy." And in the last episode, um, they're planning a funeral and his sister is like, yeah, I talked to the caterer, I made sure that they understood allergens and things like that and everything will be labeled. And then his wife and ends up eating, kind of pretending to look at the labels or whatever, and eats the soy, something with soy in it, and goes and makes out with him at the end.
Oh,
And it is purposeful. She murdered him. And she also, when you recap, they showed kind of a recap of something. She had taken out the emergency kit in the bath in the car. She had exchanged the EpiPens for used or like expired EpiPens.
oh my goodness.
And their kiss, and he's like starts to feel the anaphylaxis, and he's like, "You manage my allergen," and she's like, "Yes, I do." I mean, it was, but and he is so creepy. I mean, and I hate to say that anybody should die, but he was deserved it, but in a way. But
Everything that you hope won't happen at an event.
right. Exactly, exactly. And my friend posted online how horrible this was, that they used allergies as a way to kill somebody. And I agree with her, but I also want to say, hey, they talked about they mentioned, hey, we manage this and these are the things that we don't want to do. Um,
Hmm.
we don't, but I also think that it's really important that hey, he made out with his wife and he died because she ate his allergen. And so
Mhm.
that's even more important because even like yesterday, I had Joe Frost. Does anybody know Super Nanny?
Uh-uh.
She was a television show in the 90s, Terry, is that right? 80s, 90s, 2000s, I don't remember.
Probably a
She
little
was a
sooner
woman.
than that, yeah. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, somebody just popped in. Hey, I want to hire you. I'm like, but it's spam. Um, um, and so she's talking through her food allergies and the due diligence that she does in making sure that her sets are safe and a
Mhm.
variety of other things. And um, it kissing somebody. Oh, we were talking about touch. And
Mhm.
at one of our industry conferences 2 years ago, somebody sat in my education session, and then afterwards she texted me through LinkedIn or messaged me through LinkedIn and saying, hey, I put down that I had a touch allergy to nuts,
Mhm.
or to specifically hazelnuts. And she went to go ask the server because there were brownies there. And she
Mhm.
said, are those hazelnuts? And the server said, no, those are walnuts. And the chef or the pastry chef happened to be behind that person and said, no, those are also hazelnuts in there. And we don't eat brownies with a fork. We eat brownies with our hands. And so this woman was now scared to go shake Connie's hand or touch a tabletop because they were not linened tabletops.
Oh.
And so the residue from that hazelnuts was going to, and the brownies were going to be on the thing. So these are just things that we have to take into consideration when we're
Mhm.
planning an event. And when we're planning the food and beverage that we're doing. And if you can
Mhm.
completely eliminate an allergen from a menu, that it's not going to be like hugely obvious that it's removed,
Mhm.
then remove it, right?
Mhm.
Um,
I have a question. So
yeah,
she had a touch allergy, but could she eat hazelnuts? But she
no,
oh okay. Okay,
yeah,
so she not
yeah,
only couldn't eat them, she couldn't have them touch her. Okay.
right,
So it's
exactly.
so
Yeah,
severe that even just through the skin would be enough to,
yes, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So there's three ways. So it's consumption, touch, and inhalation. And so some people, if the protein, and Joe Frost said this yesterday, that she can't, like if there's peanut flakes flying around, like that would put her into anaphylactic shock.
Mhm.
And yesterday, if I can put the link up here, but she actually described all of the symptoms that she had when she went through anaphylaxis. And it was very like, took my breath away in the way she described it. And
Uh-huh.
I was blown away by that. And she's like, I'm laying in the bed, looking at the doctor's eyes, trying to comprehend, like, am I going to come out of this? Right.
Wow.
And it was crazy yesterday.
Yeah.
But um, so it's in our industry, it's very challenged with this. I mean, from everybody else, do you order food and beverage for your events? Yeah. And what is the challenge that you have? I mean, do you have challenges with your hotels or venues that when you're ordering the food, or caterers?
I think it's a
Getting
lot.
them
It's
to
times
label stuff.
Mhm.
Label, yeah.
that and trust. I mean,
Hmm.
you can
Trust.
talk to them and tell them all that you want and give them everything, but I don't know if they are actually following it. I don't know if the
Mhm,
salesperson is saying yes, 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 we'll do that, and then the
mhm.
chef isn't even aware.
The chef
Right.
says don't do that, and then the people who are prepping things
Mhm.
don't pay attention to the detail, and they
Right.
just go into autopilot and put things in they always do, and don't even realize that they have totally potentially just killed somebody.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's constant diligence.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my focus has always been on the contracting part of it.
Hmm.
And, that's, putting into labeling requirements and making sure you've got indemnification, which, and
Right.
that's, I mean, that's a lousy way out for the meeting planner because you just don't want somebody to be injured or worse, killed at your event. But
Right.
it's you can put things in a contract, and I've always said when I teach my contracting class, every clause in a contract is there because something bad happened, right?
Right. Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and but having the during the site visit and during the contracting part, making sure that they understand that food allergies and sensitivities are an ADA requirement,
Mm-hmm.
making sure there's an ADA clause in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, I don't generally order food for meetings, but when I was managing teams we would just try to avoid the general
Right.
known allergens. Shellfish is usually, if you don't need to put shrimp on the table, don't do it.
Right.
Nuts, milk and eggs are harder because they're just so prevalent, and
Right.
and so many people rely on that as their main protein. So that was always a challenge, but making sure that everything was clearly labeled was always my emphasis. And again, for me at home is more the area where I've had the actual direct experience. Although having friends, or one of my suppliers, our account manager, was also severely allergic to nuts, and you know watching her try to navigate life where she can't even eat at an Asian restaurant because there
Right.
could be sesame or peanuts. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to go to a Thai restaurant and not have some kind of cross contamination from those two
Right.
things.
Yeah.
You know.
And yeah, 100%. And kind of going back to something that Terry just said, is that trust, right? We have to
Mhm.
trust what we're doing, but at the same time, how do you gather that trust from the people that are making the food, as well as the people who are responsible for labeling it, because those are two different sets of people typically.
Mhm.
And when the front of the house has said, and these are direct quotes, well, I don't cook, how would I know what's in the food? That's from the front of the house. And then the back of the house is like, well, I cook it, I'm not responsible for labeling it. But you have to, and they don't like to talk
Mhm.
to each other. It's just like, this is what I do, this is what you do, and that's it. But when it comes to this, it is life threatening. And the reason that how I got Joe Frost, Super Nanny, on my podcast yesterday was the fact that 2 weeks ago, Kerry Washington was on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and he said, "Hey, I heard you have food allergies. Talk to us about it." And she's all seafood, all nuts except almonds and peanuts, mango, MSG, which is not
Oh
really
man.
listed as MSG anymore. It's all monosodium, it's spelled out, and a couple of others. But she was eating beef jerky in the bathroom at the Met Gala because she could not sit at the table and eat the food that was served. And so
Yeah.
that's how Jimmy Kimmel brought it up. And Joe Frost commented saying, "Ditto, I hear you, I feel you."
Mhm.
And I got Joe Frost responded to me on Instagram.
Sweet.
So it was a novel, but and I've had the experience of like, hey, oh, chefs, like, I wish I'd known about all these allergens before we got here. And I'm like, I explained it all to you before we got here. And so it's a lot of touch points that we have to do. A couple of things that are going to be help us in favor of helping manage this, cross our fingers, right? Is that in California, the ADDIE Act was just signed into law on October 15th, and it's the allergen disclosure in dining environments, but it's also named after a little girl named Addie. And it requires that any food facility that has 20 locations or more nationwide and has one in California, at least one in California, must label for the top 9 allergens. And so I'm saying food service companies, hotel management companies, you have 20 hotels across the country, you have one in California, this pertains to you.
Mhm.
Um, and so that becomes effective July 1st of next year. So when we're looking at, I actually need to probably do a post on this, like if you're looking at your contracts,
Mhm.
adding a clause in there saying you will adhere to the ADDIE Act,
Mhm.
as it has been instituted, and then asking questions. There
And that's
are
in California. That's a California statute.
That's a California statute. Yep,
Okay.
Governor Newsom signed it into law. So it is the only state with a law that says that has to happen. The food code, on the other hand, which is regulated, designed by the FDA, it comes out every 5 years. The 2022 food code says that unpackaged food served in bulk, i.e., our buffets, must be labeled with the top 9 allergens.
Okay.
And but that is only a guide. Each state, each jurisdiction can pick and choose what they want to put in their own food code. And one state said, "Oh, we're taking the entire food code except that sentence about allergens." Like, read between the lines, people. And so, but some of the states, Pennsylvania, for example, is the first one that said they were adopting it. They don't have a law like California to say, hey, this is how it's going to happen. I've been reaching out for 3 years now saying, okay, how is this being regulated? How is this being educated? And they're educating while they regulate. So they haven't, even though they sent an email out or a letter out to all the food service companies, there's nothing hard fast that says you're going to get dinged for this if you don't do it and you're going to get fined. There's nothing like that. Colorado is the same way. Colorado is unique in this respect that the food code relates to the entire state except for the county and city of Denver, which of course is where
all the people are.
Right.
The major events,
right.
yeah.
And he did say, somebody from the restaurant association told me, he's like, it's a low mark, like wrong, hey, a check mark, hey, you got this wrong. It's low. The health inspector's not going to come back and check it and see if you fixed it. Salmonella and E. coli are higher priorities for them than a food allergy death.
And your risk of salmonella and E. coli are a lot lower than a food allergy.
You would think so. Yeah.
I would think.
Yes, but those can actually hit more people than necessarily a food allergy, although there are 1 in every 10 people has a food allergy. And the 2027 food code will probably have some more regulations in there as it relates to food allergens. It'll come out the end of this year or end of 2026. So crossing my fingers and, that more states will also adopt these. Texas has a law not about labeling, but about training, that all food service personnel need to be trained on food allergens. And again, similar to the food code, it's kind of educating while they regulate. I don't know if people are getting dinged for not having been trained on it or not. And then Illinois this year signed a law that requires all food service personnel to be trained on celiac disease and gluten-free, which is complete. And because one of the senators, chief of staffs, has celiac disease.
Yeah.
And, so.
And sadly, I'm afraid that's what's going to drive this. And I kind of wish we had Joshua Grimes on today too, because, if you guys all probably remember the Disney case where, the woman ate at a Disney-owned restaurant and then they tried to pull you signed the waiver because you tried Disney Plus. But, having some kind of litigation because of negligence is, do we have to litigate this in order to get people to be safe? And unfortunately, like you said, I'm afraid that it's going to take, and pick any danger out there, it's going to take someone in a leadership position who personally experiences it, either themselves or somebody that they are close to really drive home how important this is. Right. And, just having it happen once at an event that I was, quasi responsible for was enough to make me really be concerned. And, the legalities aside, we're a hospitality organization as a group. And, we want people to feel safe and included and, and welcome at our events. Can we switch gears? I mean, we could talk about allergies forever. Go ahead, Connie.
Put a link in the chat box to the article about the Disney case, and Josh Grimes is one of the contributors.
Yes. So I actually interviewed Joshua Grimes, a restaurant attorney, and Mary Vargas, who's a disabilities rights attorney, earlier this
Mhm.
year on that case. And just so you
Mhm.
know, that case is still in
Still going.
discovery, and it will not go to the court until September of next year.
Mhm.
So it's going to take 3 years for the discovery to get there. But it was this, so that link is my interview with them on the Eating It on my podcast.
Oh, cool.
And it was what was really interesting to me, which was said off the air, is that all three of those attorneys coming at it from different perspectives
Mhm.
all learned something from each other during that
Hmm.
hour conversation. So
Mhm.
I thought that was really telling. And then I'm going to put the link in here about, which is also my interview with one of the lawyers, Emily Broadleib, who works at Harvard Law School Food Law and Policy Clinic, and she was instrumental in
Mhm.
getting the Food Donation Improvement Act passed. So I can talk about that.
Yeah, I did want to talk
Yeah.
about that because I think, that's the other prong of
Right.
food
Mhm.
at meetings is, the balance of ordering enough so everybody has enough to eat, ordering the right thing so everybody's safe and still satisfied. And then what do we do when there is food left over, and how can we,
Mhm.
what are the options available to meeting planners? I had a conversation with somebody yesterday about all the other waste that happens at
Mhm.
events. You order some special things from Wayfair, or you go to, some specialty blanket company to have a throw in the executive lounge, and all these things that, at the end of the day, there's a bunch of it left and it's worth something, but what do you do with it? That's a whole nother problem. But
Right.
I think how we're going with food donation is going to be important. And the last little bit I've read was from the Bill's Emerson Good
Emerson
Samaritan
Good
Act
Samaritan
from
Act. Mhm.
1992. So I
Mhm.
really am interested to hear what's going on with this new
Yeah.
legislation.
So it was signed into law in January of 23. And what
Okay.
it does, so the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act does provide legal protection to anybody making a donation.
Mhm.
But what the FDI, Food Donation Improvement Act, FDIA, does is that it actually enhances that liability, or it reinforces that liability. And it also provides, because you cannot get sued if you, with good intention, donating the food, it was time and temperature
Mhm.
controlled, you cannot get sued for making that donation if somebody gets
Okay.
sick.
Exactly.
And
In the state of Georgia, they passed a state law that is like a reinforcement of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Donated Food Act. So in the state of Georgia, you're even before the FDIA provision, in the state of Georgia, you're doubly protected, which I think is very cool.
mhm. But we still get pushback from all these hotels and convention centers. Hey, we can't do this. And I'm like, and I think it's
You can.
more right. And I think one of the challenges is, and what the FDIA does, and I'll find that, let me get you the link to that specific. It also, FDIA, Harvard Law, it actually gives you the ability to recoup the money for the trays or for the transportation to come and pick up come pick up the food. You can't, like, you say it costs you $5 to go get the food, right? You can't charge somebody $10 to go get it, right? You can recoup the hard costs of
Meaning the meeting planner can?
the hotel or the donation company or the people who are picking it up, right? The meeting planner is not going to recoup any money.
Like a community food bank.
Right. So if they have to pay, if the hotel is buying the chafing dishes for the donation,
Mhm.
they can recoup that money from the donation company saying, hey, we'll give this to you for $5 or whatever, right?
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. Or the food donation, it's, to me, it's going to balance itself out. And I'm trying to find that exact link.
So then the agency is not necessarily getting completely free food. They're getting it free plus the cost of whatever vessel it's delivered to them in.
Right. So they can
Okay.
recoup the hard cost of it,
Okay.
like Harvard Law School food.
So the agency that's receiving the food is who would pay the hotel for the chafing dish and pay for the transportation of the food.
Right.
Hmm.
Let me find used to have this saved, and it's probably because I'm not using Google.
And is that up to each agency that receives food to make the decision whether they
Yes.
will or won't do that?
Right.
Okay.
So, it's not finding it very well for me. FDI, oh, I spelled it wrong. That's why. FDIA, there we go. Yeah, I'll find the link and send it to you, but, or put it in the chat, that it really, it spells it out. So it does give you some greater protection and because it does cost money. Chafing dishes cost money, transportation costs money, the staff to go get it costs money, right? So how can we recoup some of that money without without spending it, right? So I'm saying it all incorrectly, but it's basically you can recoup the money.
It ultimately doesn't cost you money to do a good deed. Is that kind of what you're trying to say?
Basically, yeah, trying to say, yeah, that's what they're trying to do to make it so, because it also was at some point there was going to be a deduction for that money, but that's not like when you go to the grocery store and they say, hey, do you want to round up? You personally are not going to get that tax deduction. Harris Teeter is going to get that tax deduction, right? So same thing. The meeting planner is not going to be able to get that deduction, but you can say, hey, we donated this food. You can say with a partnership with the hotel, we donated this food to XYZ company, reducing how much food went to the landfill and feeding this many people, right?
And presumably the meeting organizer has the prerogative to say, and we'll cover the hard cost of the donation. So
could do that totally. Yeah.
The organizations that I've worked with would be more than happy to say, all right, you do that, you hotel or convention center or food delivery venue, you will donate this food to the extent there's hard costs associated with doing it. Then we add that to the master bill.
Yes.
We'll pay for the chafing dishes or whatever that can't be recovered, and then to your point, you've got, well, at that point, theoretically the organization could take their tax deduction if they wanted to.
Right.
Although I will argue, depending on how big the organization is, by the time it makes it all the way through to the tax people and all that other stuff, the time spent has more than wasted the deduction, but you do get the reportability of, doing the socially responsible thing.
Right.
You get to add it to your sustainability ROI and metrics and all those kinds of things. And so, from my perspective, I would be inclined as somebody representing, a meeting organizer, I would be inclined to propose that,
right.
It's just like that much. And, the gain that you get from it is so much more. But then, then what do you do with the food that's already been put out, right? And Tracy,
that
when
has
you
to
and
go
I
to a pigsty or
right,
composting, yes.
But the conversation that we had about how you guys collected all of the bread baskets that had been put on the table, and once they're on the table, they can't be fed to anybody else. And it was astonishing how much was there. And I don't remember the last event I was at. I honestly can't remember which conference it was, but at the closing lunch, they did just that. They put out, a whole plated meal and it was sponsored by the upcoming destination. And, there was a lot of bread and food and butter and all that kind of thing on the table that just didn't even get touched. And all of that went, back to, hopefully at least compost, but that's
well, and it depends on where you are. Like, in the city that you're in, is there composting facilities, right? Are there, and the other part of it too is thinking through, like, we're just going to trash it, because the other part is that they have to pay city services to come pick that up, right? So there is a cost to composting. There is a cost to sending it to the pigsty, or to the pig farm. But like my friend Chef Thomas, I'm thinking that's right, made an agreement, found a local small farm that raised chickens, And so he sent his scraps to the chicken farm, and in trade, he got eggs. I mean, his facility isn't the Georgia World Congress Center, so, but it made sense for that smaller conference center to be able to do that. And so
that's cool.
so that's another thing to do. And, and tomorrow I'm interviewing the director of sustainability for the Javits Center. And they have a 1 acre farm on the roof of the building.
On the roof. Yep.
Right. Yeah. And which is like freaking phenomenal. And we're talking about their food donation program and how they're donating. Cause like right now they're not going to be able to grow anything. And so they're going to be getting massive amounts of food away coming up because they're like changing over the farm. Right. So,
so they're basically pulling out the gardens, and so they're doing their end of season harvest, all of that stuff. If it's not being put out at the conference, it's got to go somewhere. And, and remind me, don't they have bees as well?
They have bees, they have apple trees, they have spinach and herbs and all kinds of other things. And I mean, the apples that the chef made me in 2002 years ago, like he cut up an apple and served it with honey. That they had done both on their farm. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. Well, but I'm really interested in that donation piece of it. Like, how are you doing it? Because we need to figure out how, especially right now with everything that's going on in our country, we need to be able to feed the communities in which we meet and to make sure that, because we have so much excess. Yeah. And I'm saying it not from a political statement, but people need to eat. And what can we do to help them? And then like MGM has a fantastic program. They actually ended up helping the food bank buy a freezer because they're now flash freezing some of the food meals that they make at conferences that are left over and giving it to the food bank, because typically they can't serve. What are you going to do with a plate of filet mignon, right? So they're flash freezing it so then the food bank can serve it later. Doesn't have to be served
and they can
immediately.
Use it as an ingredient into something else that,
exactly
extended more. And, Connie, I see you wanted to say something. I'm just going to say one thing real quick. We have a community compost program here. I think I pay $100 a year for it. And you get a 5-gallon bucket, and then, I don't know how many rolls of those compostable bags. And it's astonishing. I live mostly by myself. I have a part-time housemate who stays with me when necessary. And I can end up with almost a 5-gallon bucket a week. And that's all going to compost instead of going into the landfill. And it's, it's like my coffee filters and breadcrumbs and scraps and, bones from ribs or whatever it is. But just one person, the amount of, and I'm pretty careful about throwing food away, just the scraps that go into compost, it's incredible. So multiply me times 50,000 people at a conference, and it really kind of shows.
So one idea for you too, and I don't know how often you use chicken stock or vegetable stock, but also just take a Ziploc bag and freeze those kale stalks and everything, onion peels, all that, put it in a Ziploc bag. And once it's full, then make your own vegetable stock.
I know people think I'm crazy because I do that.
Yeah.
They open my freezer and they're like, what the heck is this?
I know.
Yeah. But it's good. And Connie, you were going to say something?
Well, having an amazing history going back to the 1980s when our MPI Georgia chapter helped found Atlanta's Table, which was the precursor to Feeding America, which specializes in donating prepared food. Our chapter, for 1 year when I chaired our Harvest Gala fundraiser in the 1980s, we donated $42,000 to the Atlanta Community Food Bank to help with the expenses and support for Atlanta's Table, which became a model for other community food banks around the country. But having kind of history with food donation and having that as a passion, what I find most frequently, even though I send people the link to the Bill Emerson donated, Good Samaritan donated Food Act, and now the FDIA law that's been passed, even though I provide that information, the primary pushback I get for donating food is legal liability. And you, I mean, I stood up at a Hilton advisory board meeting and they had hundreds of people in the audience. And I brought that up with Hilton because Hilton, for me, has been the primary chain that says no because of liability. I mean, you know, you can say to the leadership, but then the leadership turns over so quickly that you can't. It's like there is no liability, and even though, and so many of the hotels are franchised and have different little individual management companies and stuff, you can't get one policy that trickles down for everyone, and so you end up putting that, you know, donating excess food fight with every single contract that we write.
Right. And I think you have to get that into that contract up front for sure.
I know.
And it is in the challenge, Connie, you said it right there, is that it's all franchise organizations, right? And so it's understanding, you know, who's responsible for that. And, you know, Joan is always like, make sure that that franchise owner's name is in the contract, not just the word Hilton, right?
You do that, yeah.
Yep. And but it is making sure, and maybe it's coming to the table, hey, here's my partner that I found in your community, since you don't already have one. But it's finding that organization, because I think one of the other biggest challenges is staffing to get it done, right? Like, how do I take all of this food and put it into a container that can then be distributed to that food bank? So can that food organization come in and do that for you? Right. So figuring that part out too. I just found another link because Connie said the state thing. This is updated since August of last year. This is the state laws addressing food donation.
Oh, wow.
So I just gave you that PDF that I found.
Yeah, this is great. I'm going to send a note out to my whole list with all of these links, because I do think, I think when we talk to properties and chains and whatnot, they say liability, but what they really mean is cost.
Yeah, it is.
You know, they're afraid of it's easier to say, well, it's illegal, or we're concerned about, you know, limiting our liability. But ultimately, I think with all of this information that we have, it really does boil down to cost. And then that's where the meeting planners and, you know, event organizations can, you know, as you know your destinations that you're going to, you know, that can be part of your site selection checklist, is asking the DMOs where you're planning to go, which organizations are in place for, you know, retrieving excess food and things like that. So, you know, I think those are all parts that you know, if you're not thinking about it at the point of choosing your destination. And I was talking with Karen Robbins a couple of days ago. She's with Stewart Transportation, and I worked with her for years and years and years. And when we would go to put together our hotel package, you know, let's just say I'm just going to choose New Orleans because that was one that we had some interesting challenges with. You know, the way New Orleans is situated, there's a lot of one-way streets and a lot of, you know, can't get there from here kind of situations. So part of our site selection checklist, and before we would go out and contract with all the hotels, was we would work with them to map it out and say, all right, well, here's how the bus route is going to run. And so that would inform which properties we may or may not contract with. But as part of that site selection checklist, there's, you know, obviously there's transportation, there's airlift, you know, what can you, you know, how many flights in and out, how easy is it going to be for people to get there? And then adding something like, you know, what are we going to do with the food to that checklist, and add that to the questions that you ask of your DMO. You know, that just takes you, because we're a country of 50 different states with 50 different sets of rules, and you know, there are very, very few, I know there are some national organizations that are focused on feeding people. Feeding America, I think, is one that pops to my mind right offhand. You know, as the event organizer or meeting planner, then that's just part of your checklist of where you know, what are you going to ask and how are you going to prepare yourself when you're choosing where to place your next meeting. And then put that into your hotel contracting checklist or venue contracting checklist, because, you know, it's not always just hotels. Sometimes it's the convention center. Sometimes it's an offsite, you know, I'll say party venue, but, you know, maybe where you're going to have your reception or whatnot. You know, and food and beverages, you know, venue cost, I always attributed about 25% of the event cost. You know, of course, some of that is food and beverage. But I'm willing to bet, and I'm curious to hear what you guys' ratios are, but I think food and beverages is in the high 20%, if not higher, on your total
It is
delivery cost.
Oh no, it's at least let me find my Canva. Where my
It probably
Canva
depends
is.
on the size of the meeting too, but you
Yeah.
know, like a conference, obviously production costs and main stage and all of that stuff gets added in. But if it's an in-house hotel meeting, I think food and beverage is,
Well,
you
and
know, pretty high up there
let
on the
me see,
ratio.
hang on. PCMA. I did a webinar recently. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Can I do a screen share?
Oh yeah, here, hang on one second. Let me
Okay.
there we go.
Just crowd every other box that's open. So this is from this is the Events Industry Council's 2018 commodity spend report, which is the
Okay.
most recent that they've done that includes this. So
Wow.
food and beverage is 29% of the
Okay.
cost. And then when you break it, oops, I'll go to the next one. And then this is same thing, spend per attendee in millions. Food and beverage is $191 million.
Okay. Yeah.
And for all the meetings. And then this is the PCMA event spend, and food and beverage is 73% is the biggest. 73% said food and beverage is their biggest expense. Next, and on all of them, AV is the next one, of course. But
Okay.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
on this one, it's $100 more for food and beverage.
Wow.
And
I'd love to get those from you because yeah, and it's because my perspective is looking at the all up budget, which includes all of the fees and planning that you're spending with your creative vendor and your production vendor,
and that's this white
and your management and all of that.
Right.
And that's not included in any of this. This is just the, you know, what you have to do to put on the event. These are the hard costs.
Right. And this white empty space here covers all of that other stuff that's there.
All the other. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
all right.
They don't break it down. This is what they broke down on their report.
Okay. I wasn't adding up the numbers fast enough in my head.
Yeah.
So yeah,
30,
for sure.
40, 54, 70. So this is like 77%. If I did that right.
Yeah, and then the rest of it's going to be all
67%
fees and all the
like
other doodads, I think.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that's, you know, it's a lot. So
it is a lot.
Yeah.
Well, and then if you take the food and beverage now too, and somebody just said that they had a 29% service charge on top of the food and beverage. And like that is, and then taxes depending on where you are. And so to me, when we're thinking through managing dietary restrictions, managing food waste, is like we really have to pay attention to getting more accurate numbers and paying attention to the data that we have on our attendees. And like with my clients, I'm tracking, you know, how many people actually walk through the door, how many people, what percentage of people are still there. And one example that I use all the time now is one of my clients, we were in California, Palm Springs, and the final lunch, he's like, okay, we normally have this percentage of people attending this event. And he's like, so we're going to order lunch for 450 people. And I went back and I said, Gary, your room reservations drop from 600 to 300 for that night. And I said, how many of those 300 people live on the East Coast? And he's like, why? I said, because they're going to get on a 7 a.m. flight and fly home, because otherwise they have to do another room night and they don't want to do that. And I ordered only food for 250. We served 300, which was a little bit of a struggle for the hotel, and Gary's, you know, like freaking out, but I'm like, it was an easy lunch to fix really fast. But I saved him $82 per person times 150. Right? So he's like, oh, okay. But that's what we all need to start paying attention to, is those things that tie into how much money we're spending on food and beverage, because that's what's going to really hit our budgets. And this
and things that contribute to the waste, to the overage,
right.
because
Yeah.
you would have had 150 meals that didn't get consumed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I saw the flip side of that where, and I think it was Liz Lathan with Clavici who posted it, but there was a meeting where they were not going to hit their food and beverage minimum.
Yeah.
And so their solution to that was to do boxed lunches, grab and go, that could be easily donated to, I forget where they went. Maybe it was like a local Boys and Girls Club or something like that, but they were, kind of smaller, prepackaged, safe to store and deliver meals. And so they were able to satisfy their food and beverage minimum and do a good deed. So, it was like the inverse of what we've been talking about, where, we're all like, okay, well, how are we going to avoid food waste? Well, what do you do when you have a food and beverage minimum that you have to meet? And I used to just say, well, then just have better food.
Right. Yep. And I think that woman had already upped the level of the food that she was selecting. She could not, because I actually saw the original post, not Liz's, but I saw Liz's as well. But she'd already up leveled the food and added on as much as she possibly could without like being exorbitant. And which is, in one respect, I'm like, you managed a bad food and beverage minimum, right? In one way. But somebody said, Mark Cooper's from IAC is like, why do we have food and beverage minimums? Just pay a room, right? Just do whatever, right? But
the hotels have a formula. I mean, the Ritz-Carltons have an amazing formula. It's like $100, like $150 per room night, and they calculate it based on 1.5 people for every room. So, I mean, and that's what their revenue manager makes them quote.
Yeah.
Well, but the other aspect of trying to up the menu, and that used to always be my advice. But then if you're looking at, if it's a government meeting, or if it's a medical or a pharma, government finance pharma, there's a limit to what you can spend per person. So, that advice, I stopped giving it, because I was looking at it from my corporate days and just make the attendee experience bigger or better.
Right.
But when you're managing meetings for these other audiences, you just can't do that. Right. And I will defend, there are a lot of times everybody's like, well, you did a bad job negotiating the contract, but there's more than one time that the meeting planner or the event manager inherited a contract that was negotiated 3 or 4 years ago, that was prior to their tenure.
Right.
And something that I've instructed people or advised people to do is, if that's your situation where you've inherited this contract and you're looking at it going, oh my God.
Right. Oh yeah.
Red flag, a few people I've just said, if you want to save your bacon, take that contract, redline it, and show it to your manager and say, this is the contract I have. This is what I would have done. These are my concerns about the contract that I have in front of me today. Here's how I'm going to do my best to mitigate it.
That's awesome.
Because I do have one person in my network who lost her job because she inherited a bad contract and did her best to mitigate it, but she managed to get blamed for what ended up happening. And after I saw her go through that, I just was like, all right, all of you who inherit these contracts, and we do, there's times when we book, sometimes it's 10 years in advance. And, another thing that I used to do, and I still recommend people do, is when you're circulating contracts through your organization, you have logistics sign off on it. You have food and beverage sign off on it. You have the production team sign off on it. And then 3 years later, when, maybe those people are gone or they've just forgotten, and now they're complaining that this or that isn't in the agreement, then you've got some kind of, track record, if you will, to show that these conversations did happen. these were the market conditions in place at the time, and here's how we went about it. So
That's awesome.
I realize that's kind of a veer off, but
No.
I mean, and again, it came from, everybody wants to say, well, you did a bad job negotiating.
And then, that was,
but
I don't mean it in that.
I know you didn't, but that is part of the conversation that I hear. And it's like, well, we don't always negotiate the contract that we're managing.
Well, yeah. And even my client, and I'm on 4 or 5 years now with him, and he has negotiated free staff meals. This year, he forgot to do it. He's negotiated the price of lunch to be the standard Monday through Friday. He negotiated it down to $58 2 years ago, and he's forgotten to do that for the next 2 years. And so just for this year's conference, not having done that, it raised the food and beverage cost by $100,000. So I had to go back to the hotel after the contract is signed and say, chef, I only have this much money to spend for this, for these lunches. And it ended up actually being a savings even over the discount, right? And so in one respect, don't ask for the discount. Say, this is what my budget is. What can we do? Right? Because it's sometimes we're thinking, hey, this is a huge win.
Discount. I could have a whole ask me anything on discounts, and because discount on what?
Right. You don't know.
Like I saw somebody post about Black Friday. It's like, something is listed at $800, a TV, let's just say. And everybody's like, wait. And then Black Friday comes, and then they post the price as $1,000, and they're selling at 800. And everybody's like, yeah, I'm getting a great deal. But, it wasn't really a deal to begin with, because,
there were pictures of people going and pulling the sign at Walmart and pulling the sign out from behind that it really wasn't a sale.
Yep.
They just put a fake sale sign up.
Yeah. And, I mean, and that goes anywhere in life, really, so you got to know what your discount is off of. The one last thing that I'm going to put in here is, before we wrap up, and I'm going to quote Joshua again, anytime there is a hyperlink in your contract, be it the menu, be it the venue policies, be it the AV price list, any hyperlink in any contract, print it out and attach it as an exhibit or an addendum, one of the two, so that what you agreed to at the time, and make sure that you point to that, because anything behind a hyperlink could change even
at any time,
before you sign the damn contract. So, and I think all of us who have been doing this a while know that, but I always just like to state the obvious, because, like Tracy said, even experienced people forget sometimes,
Well, and it takes me back to, this is a long time ago, 1992, and I worked for the Aerospace Industries Association, and I was not a meeting planner. I was the graphic designer, and my editor, my boss, took out the word not, one word not, out of the sentence that somebody else in the organization had written, and it completely changed the context of the entire article. And he came back and tried to blame me for that. And I thankfully had all of the edits in a file cabinet over here, right? And but that's the thing, is like, you get a 38-page document from Venetian. Here's the meeting planner's guide. It's 38 pages. And one sentence on one bullet says this. And they can change that PDF at any time.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe it. We're at time. This has been a lot of fun. Tracy, I'm really glad that you agreed to do this with me.
Thanks for having me.
And, this is the last one of the year. So I will be spinning up a new series here come January. And I think January I'm going to be at PCMA. So I think that January.
I'll see you there.
Oh, good. I'll see you there. January is, it's anytime I go to a conference, I usually try to do the AMA as kind of a wrap up of, what all I learned when I was there, and get, feedback from other people. So happy holidays, everybody. Hang in there for the rest of the month. We're almost to the end. And I'll see you all next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Very much. Take care.
Take care.